Hello everyone, Dave here, welcome to my channel. I'm going to tell you the story of how I got involved in Rogue Studios in Bermondsey when I was a teenager, and then went on to own the place, well, half own it, with Jim, who is still a very good friend. I saw him just before Christmas, he was round here, we had a fabulous night, and much as we said we weren't going to do a load of reminiscing, we did end up doing a load of reminiscing, which of course is going to happen when you get two old studio owners together. I first discovered Rogue Studios in Bermondsey, which was a rehearsal room and recording studio in a railway arch in Bermondsey, and there were literally trains going over the top and the whole building shook, which is not the best place to have a recording studio or a rehearsal room, but it was incredibly quirky and I loved the place. I first went there when I was 14. My dad took me and my school band there, and the reason he knew about it is because he worked at the time part-time for Southwark Council in the kind of health and safety department. And some of the people in that health and safety department rehearsed there. They were in bands and they rehearsed at Rogue Studios. And they always raved about the place. And part of the reason it never got shut down for all sorts of health and safety violations was because the people that were meant to be enforcing that were actually customers of the studio, which the guys at the studio never knew until I kind of took it over. And I'd like to say when I took it over, I sorted out all the health and safety problems and we never had a visit because we never needed one. Okay. Anyway, so I first went there to rehearse. I was 14 and, you know, my band were awful and we would go along and mess around and play half a song and not know how to finish it. And we'd have the girls from the local girls' school come along with us and sneak in bottles of 2020 and, you know, all the usual sort of teenage stuff, particularly in the 90s. That's the way it was. But, over time, I kind of got to know the guys. And when we started, you know, about sort of 15, 16, we started doing pub gigs, some of which were just like a half-hour support for a local well-known covers band. And then some of them were more, so I remember the Horse and Groom in Tooting, which is a pub over in Tooting. We used to play there once a month or so, sometimes once every 2 weeks, but definitely once a month. And we used to do from 11 till 1 in the morning. And yeah, and the youngest member of the band was 14 and the oldest was probably 17. I was 16. And that just wouldn't be allowed now. But we did it and we wanted to get more gigs. So we needed a demo tape and we got what we thought was, you know, reasonably good and reasonably tight by that point. So we thought, well, we'll go and record at Rogue because we rehearsed there. So, you know, why not go and record there? And I met this kind of crazy guy called John Paul, who I will probably get into in other videos, but he was the engineer there. He took over from a guy called Paul Reeve, who actually co-produced the first and third Muse album and then stayed as vocal producer for Muse for many, many years. He also worked on the second Supergrass record and loads of stuff. Paul's got a massive history, but John Paul took over from him and was doing all the stuff that Paul had stopped doing, which was recording kids like we were. Knocking out some covers and a few originals or whatever. And I remember we set up in what became later on the control room, but at the time was kind of like the recording studio live room. And the old recording studio, which was over the stairs, John Paul was in there and recorded us to an 8-track tape. That was done in like 4 hours in an evening, you know, sort of a school night, sort of Wednesday, Thursday night or something like that. And we were there sort of 7 to 11. And we recorded 18 songs just live, so did 2 takes of everything, just ran it through and got it down on the tape. And then I think it was the Saturday, either not that week, but the week after, the Saturday, we went back to mix it. And that was where I kind of nudged him off and did it myself. He could tell that I mean, he's subsequently said he was quite impressed. He could tell I sort of knew what I was doing. And although I didn't know what I was doing, really, it all was familiar to me because, you know, it's EQ, but it's just more EQ. And when people go, wow, I don't know how you can work that thing when they look at a big mixing desk, it's like, well, every channel's the same. So if you learn one, you've kind of learnt it all, you know, fair enough groups and all sorts of other buttons that do things. But in general, the channels, if you learn one, you learn them all. So I was fairly cocky and fairly confident and I would just do my thing and be happy with it. And we got our demo done and we got more pub gigs and that was all really good. And one day later on, when I was around 18, John Paul had upgraded the studio by that point. He'd gone to 16-track and then had bought a 24-track tape machine. And he was building a new control room the other side of the building, what was in the live room that we used to do our live session in. And he was doing a fantastic job of it. But the problem is he wanted to concentrate on building that and getting that going. And he also had sessions to do. And he also needed to raise some money to do some bits and pieces. So he thought, I'll sell my 16 track and I'll sell my old desk, because he'd bought a new desk for the new control room. So at the time I said I was 18 and I had a few grand. I mean, not massive amount of money. I think I had about $3,000 or something saved up in the account from various sort of inheritance and present money. And I was a computer programmer, and I would do jobs for people and get paid, pretty decently actually, even in my late teens. So I had this money saved up, and I bought the 16 track reel to reel and this bigger, which was a 32 to 8 to 2 Studio Master desk, which was what he had in there doing both the 8 track and then the 16 track studio. And so I bought that off him, and that gave him his $3,000, which allowed him to buy whatever he needed to buy, cables or whatever for the new control room. The only caveat is that I couldn't actually take the desk and the tape machine, because he was still finishing sessions off on it, and it was still installed in the old studio, which needed to be working until the new studio was open. So I was like, so I've paid you for something that I can't actually take. And he went, yeah, I know, but I'll give you the keys to the studio. I'll cut you some keys. And any time in downtime you want to use the studio for your own things, you can come in here and use it with all the other toys. And there were so many other toys, microphones, compressors, reverbs, whatever else, proper studio monitors that I didn't own. And I was like, well, I've effectively paid $3,000 for unlimited recording time in a studio at this point. And at 18 years old, that was like, okay, I'm going to make the most of this. So I didn't drive at that time, but friends of mine were driving. So we would, go out, a few beers, a few smokes, whatever. And then we would drive up to the studio sort of 11 o'clock, midnight, and go in there and jam and play and make music and just mess around till 3, 4, 5 in the morning. Sometimes sleep on the sort of the drum room floor and on the control room floor. Get up in the morning and go off and, go back to doing work or whatever. If I had a job, I worked in a guitar shop at the time, and other friends of mine were either at university or being lazy, I don't know. So yeah, we'd do that, and it was just a fantastic time of creativity. But it wasn't long before sessions came in, and John Paul was really needing to work on the other studio, and Jim, who was his kind of co-owner at the time, said, John Paul, you stay doing that, we'll get Dave to do the sessions, he knows how to work the studio. So at age, probably I just turned 19, or maybe it was in the last few weeks of me being 18, I actually had paid work. I think I was getting like £5 an hour. I think I did a 10-hour day and got 50 quid for it. But I just did not care. I was in there and I loved it. And I remember going out at some point and said, they've asked me to put chorus on that and a reverb on that and a delay on that, but you have only got 2 units to do it. What should I say? And John Paul kind of looked at me and went, blag it, get through it. It's your problem, And then in the end, I was thinking, well, I could do the delay with a guitar pedal and I'll patch that in around that. And I solved the problem. And it's like, there was my first recording session and I solved a problem. And my first actual paying session that came from Rogue to me, because I also had some, but before I did that session, I actually ended up getting some friends in who paid me to record something just to go through the process with some customers. And then I ended up doing this paid session for Rogue Studios for this guy called Senna, who ended up coming back with a couple of different incarnations of his band for many, many years after that. And as my skills improved, his skills improved. And it was almost like I was just staying one step ahead. As long as I could produce the song better than he could do it, I always had a customer there. But it was nice. We kind of grew together. And over time, I got so many different customers, that would come back and record me. And it was always lovely to have familiar faces and people, walking into something and going, I know what we're going to get here. They're really cool guys. They do this sort of music. You can kind of relax. There's more anxiety when you don't know what to expect. At least there is with me. Anyway, getting back to the how I kind of got involved in the studio. So I was doing recording sessions in the old 16-track recording studio while the 24-track studio was being built by John Paul. And at some point he was running so behind and he'd run out of money again, and he needed, I can't remember what it was, 5,000, 10,000, something like that, to buy patch bays and some other bits and pieces. I mean, at the time we needed 6 patch bays and they were like $1,500 each. So yeah, so that would have been sort of $9,000 on patch bays. And I ended up, again, in the 90s, you know, things were fairly prosperous, and it was New Labour and all of that as well. And we'd just come out of the John Major-led Conservatives, and actually, with everything that had been going on in the post-Thatcher years, you know, Britain, at least in my experience, was a bit of a license to print money. So I went to the bank. I just went to Barclays and said, I've got a chance to invest in a studio. I've been working there for, 6 months or so. Can I have a loan? And without any kind of checks or anything or whatever, they just gave me like 10 or 15 grand. I can't even remember what it was. And I went back to John Paul and said, right, I've got your money. You can do your bits and pieces. And it was like, I've bought a bit of a studio. It's like I'm 19 years old, or I think I was 19 years old, and I'd bought a bit of the studio that I've been rehearsing in since I was 14, and it was really exciting. And we sat there sort of as co-studio owners, even though my percentage was absolutely tiny. We sat there as co-studio owners wiring the new 24-track studio, and it took 3 weeks of soldering all those patch bays, all the tiny, those Rian, Bantam patch bays, the TT patch bays, and they had 5 little connectors, and you had to do the normalization at the back by connecting things. And we wired that for, it was 3 solid weeks. My lungs hurt, partly because of the but partly because of the solder fumes. And we had a little TV up in the corner that I brought in from home that was a black and white TV where the vertical scanning was out, so the bottom of the TV was at the top, and there was a fuzzy line, and then the rest of it, and then I had the VHS player. It wasn't the one that I first did my recordings on, but I had a VHS player, and we watched what was it? We watched Red Dwarf series 1 to 6, and The Italian Job, and 40 Towers and Monty Python over and over and over again in a loop for like 3 weeks, while soldering for 16 to 18 hours a day. And on the last day, there was a band from Germany coming over to record with John Paul, and it was the first session, and we were up all night soldering. At this point, I think we'd both been up 24, 26 hours, something like that, soldering and getting the studio ready. And he had to then start the recording session, and we were both shattered. I remember setting up a drum kit in room 1 downstairs, so that when we started to get tired, we could go down there and just smack the drums for like a minute, just to like have a workout, and the loudness would wake you up, and then you go back on and carry on soldering. And I remember we were there and we got the last patch bay, and we were like, right, this is all going to work. We'll debug it during the session, but this is all going to work because we worked really hard on this, and we turned it all on, and the whole thing just went zzz, and it was just buzzing. Everything was buzzing, and that wasn't good at all. So at this point, John Paul, I think his mind was fried, and I got patch cables and started to patch between things. And as I started to patch things, the buzzing went, and I said to him, we haven't got a common earth. And he went, what do you mean? I went, we haven't got a common earth. So I unscrewed all the patch bays, and all the earths are on the top. And I got a bit of, I think it was a stretch of mic cable, and I pulled out the one of the wires out the middle of the mic cable and stripped the wire off it, and just put it across the top and did a dab of solder to join all the earths and all the things that needed the earths joining, which was pretty much everything. And then all the cables had got kind of mixed up at the back, so I got my foot and we pushed, with our feet, pushed the patch bays back in and we're screwing them in, turned it all on, nothing buzzed at all, and it all worked. And we went, we're never touching those patch bays again. And I swear to you, we never did touch those patch bays again. When I sold the studio, they were all wired exactly the same as the day that we put them in, because we had various amount of redundancy, so things changed in the studio, but I could just relabel the patch bay. We didn't solder anything up to that. And that was I was 19 years old. I had no idea what I was doing, and there I was with this crazy guy who really was crazy, like with a customer outside, sort of kicking the patch bays into the rack and kind of screwing them in as quick as I could to try and stop the buzzing. And then I hung around for a couple of hours in case he needed me, but he started the session. I think he'd been up 40 something hours by the time he'd finished with them, and there may have been some substances to help him do that. I don't know, because I'm not him and I couldn't possibly comment. Yeah, that was kind of how I got involved in Rogue Studios. And then from there, I went on, was recording on the 24-track tape, and eventually became main engineer, and also took it into the digital age, which will be another video. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I will see you in another one. Please like, please comment, ask me questions, subscribe, all of that stuff. See you later. Bye. Hello everyone, Dave here. Welcome to this video. Welcome to my channel. Oh, that sounded a bit Alan Partridge. Aha! I'll do that again.